All right, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to say it again because I know everybody was kind of talking. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Yes. I'm one of those people that requires response. So sometimes I'll ask you a question and know that I can see you out there. So just humor me. All right, so today we're talking about burnout to balance. And burnout's sort of a sensitive topic because people are experiencing it. We're in the healthcare field experiencing it, but there's some contention around just bringing some person in to talk about it one time and then, you know, what are you supposed to do then? So the intention here is to cover what burnout is, but I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the what and the statistics because a lot of you all already know this information. I want to move straight to what the root causes are and start to get into some solutions. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, obligatory disclosures. I am the owner of Dr. Fort MD Physician Coaching Company and the author of Stress-Free Mom MD for this Physician Wellness blog. So because it's a sensitive topic, and I'm going to pull this so that I can walk around if I want to, because it's a sensitive topic, there can be two ways to listen. You can come from a place of curiosity, openness, understanding, or you can come from a place of judgment or defensiveness or cynicism and resignation. And how many of you know that cynicism and resignation is very deep in this community? Yeah, I saw one hand go up, but I know the rest of you guys feel me, right? Yeah. So I invite you to come from this place of learning, from this place of curiousness and openness, because there may be some things you hear that you haven't heard before. There may be some things you hear that you have heard before, and there may be some things that you want to roll your eyes at. But come from that place of curiousness and openness and expandedness. And let's see if we can have a little fun here. So how many of y'all see yourself at all in this word cloud? Can I get a show of hands? Is that it? Everybody's like, yeah. So we're going to start out with the obligatory definition of burnout. Christina Maslach, she was the person who discovered burnout. She's an industrial psychologist who was sent in to evaluate employee engagement back in the 70s. And what she found that there was burnout in the corporate community. And so she coined this inventory, the Maslach Burnout Inventory, which is about 22 questions, but is contained in 3 key symptoms. And those symptoms are emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced accomplishment. Now, emotional exhaustion. Have you ever been on vacation? A full 7 days, feeling relaxed, feeling wonderful, and then you get back from that vacation, go back to work, and you feel like you never stepped foot out on that beach in the first place? Anybody? Yep, emotional exhaustion. Now, the depersonalization point or piece, that's characterized by cynicism and sarcasm. Now, let's just be honest here. Let's be real honest. You ready to be honest? How many of you all are just a little bit cynical? Just a little bit? Not at all. And a little bit resigned, like, it's never going to change. Just going to suck it up. Right? Yeah. And so cynicism and sarcasm is a defense mechanism. It really is a way to put distance between you and the people that you serve, the patients, right? And your colleagues too. So, you know, if you ever have these gripe sessions, you see a patient and you go back in the nurse's lounge or the doctor's lounge and you just start to gripe about, you know, oh my God, I saw this patient and you know, anybody? Nobody? Oh, come on. Come on. I forgot to tell you who I was, by the way, so I'm going to pause and do that so you know that I know. I know. I know. Okay. So let me just finish this slide, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to kind of tell you who I am. And then the reduced sense of accomplishment. You ever sometimes get the feeling that no matter what you say, no matter what you do, that it's not going to make a difference. It's not going to make a difference. Things are not going to change. No matter what you say, no matter how many times you tell that patient they need to stop smoking, no matter how many times you tell that, patient they need to do this or that, no matter how many times you tell, your colleagues or your boss or whatever that you need a little bit of a respite from the demand of the schedule, no matter what you say or do, it doesn't make a difference. Yeah? So these are the 3 key symptoms of burnout. And I'm going to tell you why all of this is important in a minute. But first, let me just backtrack a little bit and introduce myself. So you saw my name up there. I'm Dr. Maisha Claiborne. I'm a family practice doctor by training, and I have a practice here in the Atlanta area. It's integrative medicine. I've been practicing for 14 years, what is that, 13 years, somewhere around in there. You lose count after 10. And I've had my practice for 10 years this year. So what I want you to know about me is this. I actually have burnout twice in my career. Now, and 13 years is not, I mean, it's paying dues, but it's not a super long time to have been in practice. And what I see is that healthcare professionals are burning out earlier and earlier out of school, out of residency, out into practice. So the first time I burnt out, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I actually was in residency the first time I burnt out. And that was before there was language for any of this stuff, right? You just head down, do the work, push, push, push. And I remember I was feeling just, day by day a little bit more disconnected. I was isolating a little bit more from my class. And there was this one day, this one evening I came home after I was post-call, and I just said, you know what, I can't do it anymore. I quit. And when I said I quit, I didn't mean I quit medicine. I meant I quit life. That's where I was. And fortunately, I didn't quit life. What I did was I put down those pills that I was about to take, that bottle of Percocet that I had from a knee surgery about a month earlier. I put down those pills and I picked up the phone and I started to dial. And I dialed a number and I got voicemail. And then I dialed another number and I got voicemail again. And I started to think, well, maybe my original plan was supposed to be, maybe I was supposed to do that anyway. But then something in my head said, no, just keep dialing. And what happened was I just said, look, if you're not religious, please pardon. But I said, God, if you want me to make it through the night, you better do something. And when I woke up the next morning, what I found was that I had written myself to sleep. I write poetry. And so I had written myself to sleep. And I woke up in a pool of tears and, dry tears on my face. But at that point, I realized there was something that I had to do differently in my career because I couldn't go on to practice in the way that they were training me to practice. My values were not aligned with the schedule, with the practice that I was being trained in. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about root cause. Now, I spent most of my career then trying to discover what could I do? What is it that I could do that fulfilled me inside of this profession of medicine, that fulfilled me, that also aligned with my values, with my practices. And so I did contract work. It's called locums. Did locums work for upwards of 10 years. And during that time, I also started my practice. And what happened was, everything was going well. Everything was going well. I thought I had beat this whole burnout thing. And then 5 years into my practice, I burnt out again. Now, having learned from my previous experience and the fact that it was several years later, I was able to Google burnout. And I got myself a mentor coach. And I was able to recover and put things in place. And that was back in 2012. That was when I realized that we as healthcare professionals, we don't have that kind of support that outside professionals may have. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? Other people may, automatically know who to go to for this type of thing. We don't necessarily have that, right? Yeah? Yeah. Remember, I can hear you. Not on TV. So yeah, so that's my story. That's a little bit about why I do this. You know, I took on back in 2012 then helping or educating and empowering healthcare professionals around this topic. And I started speaking at residency programs, and I've done a couple of hospital grand rounds, and most recently spoke at the International Conference on Physician Health. So this is pretty much where my career is going, to be able to empower and support us, because there's not a lot of support for us going around in burnout. There's a lot of education, there's a lot of research, which is why I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that, because you can always look that up, but there's not a lot of solution out there. Make sense? All right. Thank you. So back to, I have to see where I am here. Back to this slide. All right, so let's distinguish between stress and burnout, because there is a distinction. And what I want to ask you all is, what would you, in your own words, how would you distinguish stress from burnout? Let's just call it out. What's the difference? Helplessness in burnout. Yeah. What else?
Stress you care, burnout you don't.
Stress you care, burnout you don't. Anyone else? One other person.
Stress is physical and burnout's mental.
Yeah, well, yeah. Stress, yeah, absolutely.
Stress
So,
can be managed.
go ahead.
Stress can be manageable. Burnout is difficult.
Yeah, stress is manageable. So yeah, so with stress, the person who's stressed can imagine that if things got better, things would get better if they could get some control over things. And with burnout, there's no recovery. It's just like I said, in that emotional exhaustion. You can't recover no matter what you do. Now, here's the thing. There's such a thing as good stress. This is an interesting and important thing to understand, right? So this is our stress curve. And obviously, when there's too little stress, we're beach bums. We don't really do anything. But there's an optimal amount of stress in which we are at our peak performance. Okay, and then of course we start to tip over into exhaustion. But burnout exists right over here, where we're past that shelf. We've fallen off the shelf, and this is where most of us exist on a day-to-day basis. Most of us push beyond exhaustion. We rise up every single day. We come to work, no matter how we feel, no matter what's going on in our lives. We rise up and we push through whatever it is we need to push through in order to be at our jobs, in order to take care of our patients. This is where we exist. All right? And why this is important is this. Because when we deal with the root cause of what's burning us out, then we can actually impact that, right? We can actually raise that shelf or delay that shelf, but we have to be dealing with the root cause. And that's one of the things we're going to go through. What are some of the root causes of burnout? So, by show of hands, how many of you in the room have at least 2 of these on the list? All right. Keep your hands up if you have at least 3, 4, 6. All right. If you have more than 6 of these, then you may be burning out. All right. So just to recognize, and I know some of you who didn't raise your hands. Some of you who didn't raise your hands. It's okay. We know that you may have 1 or 2 of these things. So all the studies across the board. Now I want to let you know that you'll hear me talk about some statistics. When I do talk about stats, it'll be more in the physician realm. And it's not because I don't love all of you. It's because most of the research is with physicians. And they're starting to break into nurses. There's not a lot on pharmacists, and surprisingly not a lot on dentistry as well. So a lot of the data is on physician burnout. And a lot, there's a rising data in nurse burnout, but not a ton. So, but across the board, there's more burnout. The risk is higher in women than men. Can anybody say why women are more prone to burnout than men? Can anybody just call out? Right, so all of the above, all of the above. There's just multiple hats that we wear as women, women professionals and moms and spouses and taking care of the household. Now that doesn't mean, there aren't men who cook. I know you guys cook. I know you guys contribute to the household, helping take care of the kids. I'm not diminishing the contribution of men, but overall, this is the case. This is why, and that means women, we especially have to be mindful of taking care of ourselves. Now let me just say this too. Men are, I think one of the reasons, this is speculation by the way, one of the reasons that women have a higher burnout rate than men is because men are actually a little bit better at taking care of themselves. Women automatically, there's something in our physiology as women, anthropologically, that makes us put ourselves last. Would you agree with that? Yes. Yeah. Men, would you agree that when you have a need, you meet that need? When you have a need, that you meet that need most times? I mean, sometimes not, but most times, would you agree when you have a need, you meet that need? What? Yes. Oh, no, somebody says no. But I heard some yeses in there. Right, so there, case in point. All right, but here's the thing. Burnout affects everyone. All right, it affects doctors and staff, nurses, PAs, the administrative staff. It affects everyone. It affects patients. When you're being a little cynical, when you're feeling a little resigned, or when you're overly tired, you think a patient can't see that? Yeah, they can see it. No matter how good of a mask we put on, they can see it. They can feel it. It affects our friends, our family, our supports, our spouse, our sex life. Doesn't it affect your sex life? Yeah. Somebody's like, who cares about sex? Right. It affects our children. It affects our children. I have talked to several of my clients who, when they come to me, they're like, my child says I'm overworking. Mommy, you need to quit that job because you're never home. Right? The children know, even the little ones. I have a 2.5-year-old boy, and they know. He's like, Mommy, you okay? He grabs my face. Mommy, you okay? Mommy, you okay? Okay, good. Mwah. That's my boy. Yeah, so they know. How many of you have a social life or don't have a social life? Right? This affects your social life as well. But most importantly, it affects your overall happiness and satisfaction. It can cause illness when you're working in that off that shelf, in that exhaustion area that we talked about earlier. Anxiety, depression, addiction, we have access. We have access. And increased divorce rates. And then suicide. Yeah. So I don't have the statistics for nurses, but I can tell you that the number for doctors is 300 to 400 a year, dropping off the face of the earth by their own hand, right? That's more than one doctor a day. The risk for females, again, is 2.27 times greater than the regular female population. For men, it's 1.41 times greater than the regular population. And I would be interested to see how this is affecting nurses, like with the suicide rate for nurses. Medical students are being affected. So it's not even just us out in practice. Medical students are being affected. I think at least a couple of times a week. You know, I'm a part of a lot of physician forums. At least a couple of times a week I hear about medical students and residents who are taking their own lives. So I'm sure this is plaguing across the board our health profession. And it's really sad. And this is why it's important to get to that root cause. But here's the thing. I always hear, who's to blame? Who's to blame? Like, who's to blame for burnout? Really, it's multifactorial, all right? So we're going to start with the most obvious, the practice environment, right? The long work hours, the electronic medical records, the demanding schedules that require that personal sacrifice, patient overloads, difficult staff and colleagues, bureaucracy, politics, yes, workplace bullying. I'm not really going to step over anything. Gender and racial bias. How many know that there's gender bias in healthcare? Yeah. How many know that there's racial bias in healthcare? Yeah. So we won't step over any of that. And these are things that are causes, root causes of burnout in the practice environment. Now, the interesting thing is this: when you chose this profession, you knew that there were going to be long hours. You knew that there were going to be demanding schedules. You knew there was going to be personal sacrifice, right? So that, even though that is present, you knew that part going in. But what you didn't expect was the change in medicine, the change in our healthcare system, the increasing bureaucracy and politics, the increasing of the corporacy of medicine, the increasing the EMRs. You didn't expect the EMRs, I bet. Right. So that, on top of the already demanding schedule, puts an additional strain that contributes to burnout. Here's another thing: values misalignment. Now, when I talked a little bit about that in my story, and when I talk about values misalignment, what I mean is that what's important to you and what you're doing are not in sync. All right? So when what's important to you and what you're doing is not in sync, or when the values of your job, the values of your career do not match what's important to you in here, then you experience suffering. So the key question is that, what is important to you? And a lot of times we have forgotten what's important to us, or we just ignore. We put ourselves on the back burner, right? Because we're trained to put ourselves on the back burner as healthcare professionals. And when you're here, you want to put the patient first. That's absolutely necessary, right? But there's got to be a balance somewhere. And after so many years, we've lost that balance. Would you agree? Yes. Right. Personal life stressors, right? How many of you in here are married? And how many of you have children? And how many of you have aging parents that you're taking care of? Right. How many of you, and you don't have to raise your hand, but this is one of those internal questions, have personal conditions, health conditions? Patients come to us for that. Who then do we go to? We are empowering and teaching our patients, this is what you need to do to take care of yourself, but who is there for us? Does that make sense? Yes? Yes. Right. So we have to look at the fact that we're human, we bleed, and we die. And similarly, I guess I could piggyback on that, the culture of medicine is a root cause. So even though we're people, we have this depiction of being these strong, silent, I don't need any help, type of people. And our conditioning is to leave our feelings at the door and don't show weakness. Would you agree? leave our feelings at the door, and don't never, never, ever, ever show weakness, right? And so this conditioning, this depiction of us as a community doesn't allow for our humanity. It puts us in a box, right? So this is an important root cause. And then there's the strained leadership and staff relationship. And that can come from ineffective communication. That can come from the disconnection of the C-suite from the frontline workers. And that can also come from leaders who are burned out. Let's face it, just because the leaders are leaders doesn't mean they're not burnt out, because they're wearing multiple hats as well. They're wearing multiple hats. They're people, they bleed, all of that, right? So I'm finding, and I talk to them all the time, I talk to them every day. I know that the leaders are also burned out. And burned out leaders have an impact on the frontline staff. Make sense? Does that make sense? Yeah. And then there's our own internal personality traits. Now, don't take this as a blame thing. This is just the kind of people who go into the healthcare field fiercely independent. I can do it all by myself, putting yourselves on the back burner, strong-willed, and yes, we know it all. Am I right? Yeah, we know it all. Can't help us. Don't even try. So this is sort of an internal thing, and this is what it took. This is what it took to get through medical school, to get through nursing school, to get through, PA school. This is what it took, right? You had to be fiercely determined. You had to adopt these traits. And again, in the hospital setting, in the office or practice setting, this is necessary. It's important. But if you never turn that switch off, then it'll lead you right off the shelf of that stress curve. Does it make sense? Does that make sense? Yeah. So these are assets, and sometimes they're like assets gone wild. Does that make sense? Now, this is a very important one. We a lot of times refuse to seek out help. Would you agree with this? Would you agree with this? Yeah, yeah. Because we should be able to avoid depression. We should be able to handle it. Does that sound familiar? I should be able to handle it. Everybody else looks like they're handling it okay, right? Everybody else looks like they're doing okay. But something must be wrong with me that I can't handle it. So we keep going and pushing ourselves and going inside. We also have, some of us have the fear that being diagnosed or being labeled could impact our career. Who has that? Who recognizes that, I should say? Who recognizes that? Yeah, it's a thing. When I was in residency, there was a doc who was honest when he was applying for his license. He was honest on the question, have you ever been diagnosed with depression or any other mental illness? And he got benched for 6 months. He had to go through counseling. Now, this was like he had been diagnosed in maybe medical school and had been treated and was fine. But he got benched for 6 months and had to he ended up delaying his residency graduation because of this. And what we learned is that you never tell the truth about that. You never tell the truth. And so it's understandable that we don't seek help, because number one, who do we talk to? Who do we talk to? And that it won't affect our careers, right? So let's talk a little bit about solutions. And in order to talk about solutions, I have to talk about mindset, right? So who's really in control? Now, when I get to this part, people always, it's just like a fire raises up inside of people, like, mindfulness, right? I'm sick of hearing about mindfulness, right? So here's the thing about mindset. Mindset empowers action in the face of seemingly unworkable circumstances, right? And so when I talk about mindfulness, I'm not talking about necessarily taking a deep breath and chanting Om. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. Mindfulness, by definition, is simply the state of being aware, the state of being conscious. And what we need to be conscious of is what we want and what needs to change and what's missing. Now, this is both individually and this is both as a community, right? Individually in your life, if you're burning out, what is it that you want? What is it that needs to change? What's missing? And what actions do I need to take to get from where I want to be? As a community, it's the same questions. What do we want? What do you want? What needs to change? What's missing? And what actions do we need to take to get from where we are to where we want to be? Now, as a community, it's a little bit more challenging because that means you have to come to some cohesiveness, and the leadership has to be on board. So it makes it seem a little bit more challenging. Now, in the meantime, though, you really can be asking this of yourself. These are questions that, you know, when we first went into this profession, we knew what we wanted. We knew what our vision was, what our goals were. We knew we wanted to help people. We knew we wanted to make a difference. And then you get into the rigmarole of life and you kind of forget because you're sort of on that train, right? You're on that moving side. You know the moving sidewalk at the airport? Yeah? You know the moving sidewalk, you get on that moving sidewalk and the sidewalk takes you and you get off and there's another moving sidewalk. And then you get off and it takes you and there's another moving sidewalk. Like, how long have you been on that moving sidewalk? And then we have to recognize our own resignation. Because here's the thing, resignation and cynicism get in the way of seeing solutions, right? So when we have that cynicism plus the resignation, it equals no possibility. We have to believe change is possible first before change can actually be possible. So this is just the practice of mindfulness, knowing what you want, knowing what's missing, knowing what needs to change, what actions that need to be taken, and then believing that change is possible, right? So it's like, oh, this is a bunch of foo-foo. No, this is actually very important because there's a lot of research on mindset and how mindset impacts behavior. And if you think about two patients with the exact same condition with completely different mindsets, one being like, oh, I'm on board, I'm ready to do what you say, I'm ready to do what needs to be done to make that lifestyle change, to get well, to get healthy, and then you have the other one that's like, fix me, I don't want to do anything. You would see a difference in the outcome, yes? Yes? So mindset matters. Mindset matters. And it's the foundation for everything else, right? So then the second thing that you have to do is reevaluate your goals and priorities, all right? So let's do a little exercise. I'm going to do a quick little exercise. You all have a piece of paper or get your devices out. And I want you to just make a quick list of what's important to you. Just make a quick list. Just take a minute. Could be family, could be your health, could be a relationship, obviously your career, you're here. What are the things that are important to you in your life? Just make a quick list. When you finish making that list, because I know we have some people who are just a little bit overachievers in the room, they made that list in like 5 seconds. When you complete that list, I want you to rank in order of importance that list. Rank from 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever you've put down. Just rank in order of importance. 5 most important things. Okay, so what I want to know is this. Have you all finished ranking? Yeah? Okay, good. Before I ask this question. How many of you all notice that what's at the top of your list is not what you're actually doing? Like, what do we have as number, like, call out, what do we have as some top 5s? What's number 1, number 2, number 3? What else? And what else? Somebody said sanity? All right. Yeah. All right. So how many of you all notice, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hands, that the things that are most important to you, you don't necessarily put first? Nobody? Really? Come on, y'all. I'm in this profession too. Right. So the things that are most important to you all that you don't necessarily put first all the time. That's a dissension in your values and priorities. So if you're doing that, if that's the case, then you want to reevaluate your values and your priorities. And then all there is to do is to ask the question, if I were to close the gap between what's important to me and what I'm actually doing, what needs to change? What do I need to do? Okay? So what is it that you're neglecting that's truly important to you? Where do you put yourself on the back burner? Where do you put yourself on the back burner? Right? And so if you're burning out, it can actually be an opportunity for you to rediscover what really makes you happy and to begin to put things in place that help you to achieve that. Okay? So the principle of priority states that you must know the difference between what's urgent and what's important, and you must do what's important first. And then the other quote that I love is, a simple life is not seeing how much we can get by with, that's poverty, but how efficiently we can put first things first. When you're clear about your purpose and your priorities, you can painlessly discard whatever does not support these, whether it's clutter in your cabinets or commitments on your calendar. So if I were to close the gap between what I have and what I need to be well, what things would I need to change? Make a list, and that's your guidepost. So the first thing in the strategy is to create a self-care plan. I think this is sort of where the rubber meets the road. I think it's very important to be creating a self-care strategy. And in order to do that, you have to know your non-negotiables. Know your non-negotiables. What is the minimum that you need to be well? Like, what's the minimum amount of sleep? When do you need to eat? Drink water. Like, these are the basics, the stuff that we should be taking care of, that a lot of times you're running around the hospital. Like, how many of you are on your feet all day running around? Yeah, never stopping, to hardly breathe. This is you have to be able to take care of yourself even throughout the day. What do you need in the way of quiet time? How many of you all in here are self-proclaimed introverts? Raise your hand if you're an introvert. Yeah, you can tell the introverts because they're like, and how many of you are extroverts? Right, even the extroverts were kind of like. But so as an introvert, this is an important thing for you all to know, because it's what's interesting. I think there's a lot of people who are introverts that go into the health profession, even though it requires that you interact with people all day long. And what I know about introverts, because I am one, is that the interaction with people actually drains you, right? Right. So you're at work and you're pouring yourself into patients, and you have to interact with patients all day, or colleagues. Sometimes it's not patients, sometimes it's colleagues, all day. And then you get home and you just want quiet. You just want quiet. How many people actually drive home in the car with no radio on? Yeah, because you need that quiet as an introvert. So one of the things as an introvert you need to do is to find that time throughout the day, if you can stow away for even 15 minutes to have complete quiet space, that even a snowball rolling down a hill, you know? And so as an introvert, it's very important to know that quiet time is an essential part of your self-care strategy, right? It's one of those things that would be a non-negotiable. Now, for the extroverts, you derive energy from interacting with people. So when you're face-to-face with patients, when you're, that actually energizes you. But as an introvert, now here's the other thing about having that quiet time when you come home as an introvert, when you come home, and sometimes for extroverts as well, but as an introvert, when you come home, don't you need that time to decompress? Yeah. So you need to be able to communicate that to your family. You get your family involved in your self-care strategy, right? So when you come home at the end of the day and you really need just 15 to 20 minutes, and especially if you're a mom and you come in and the kids are like, mommy, 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 and you're like, oh God, I just need 15 minutes, right? But you miss the kids because you've been gone for so long and you want to interact with them, so you push through. You push through, and then you got dinner, and then you got bath time, and then you got bedtime, and some of us have more work to do after that, right? Some people have more charting to do. And then you got to spend time with your significant other. And then it's 11 o'clock, right? So you just want to make sure that if you're an introvert, when you get home, you carve out some time to just decompress, to go upstairs, take off your clothes from the day, sit down 15 minutes to just get some quiet time. Does that make sense? Yes? Extroverts, if you have introvert partners, just understand that. Just understand when they need a little quiet time. Similarly, transition rituals, right? So as we're coming home from the day, sometimes we're still on the phone with people at work. How many people are driving home and they're still doing work in their head or on the phone? Yeah? Yeah. So you want to create a transition ritual between the time you leave the hospital and the time that you get home. Now I have a guy, a male physician client that we talked about creating this transition ritual on the way home, and it was a song. It was music, right? He likes music. And I would suggest that on the way home that you not listen to talk radio or NPR, right? Because that's not empowering. It's nothing exciting on the news these days. Well, that's my opinion. That's speculation, excuse me. But my suggestion would be to either pick an audiobook that you like or some music that you like, because what it does is it relaxes you. It relaxes you, it helps your mind to decompress, and it helps you to transition from that workspace to that I'm getting ready to be home with my family space. Make sense? Yeah? So you find yourself a transition ritual so that when you get home, you've taken off that hat or the scrubs or the white coat or the stethoscope or whatever it is you want to take off, and you leave it in the car. Hopefully you've left it at the hospital when you walk out the door and you're home now, right? Then you go in and you have that decompression time, even if it's just 15 minutes, and then you get with your family. Does that make sense? Delegation. This more applies to home than it does here. That you all have policies and procedures for that kind of stuff here. But let the people in your life help you. So I had this one doc. She's a rural family doc, and she, like some of us, are introverts, and she'd come home and jump right into motherhood, spousehood, making dinner, all of that. And so what we talked about was just what I just talked about, having that transition ritual and then creating her decompress time. And one of the things that we talked about doing was having a conversation with her husband about getting involved, starting dinner, and so that she can have that decompressed time, right? Now, how many of you all have older children, like maybe in the teens? Yeah? Okay, yeah. So if you have children in your tween, teen age, they can help too. And I hear somebody over saying, no, they can't. I don't know what to say about that one. But theoretically, your teenagers can help. You just have to have the right conversations with them. You have to have the right conversations and be willing to show them what it is that they need to do. All right? So, but you can and get your spouses involved, get your family members involved. I'm lucky enough to have my mom live here in Atlanta with me. And just case in point, this morning I had to be at 6:45. My son's daycare doesn't open until 6:30. There was no way I would have made it. So I had to take my son to spend the night with his grandma last night. And that's something that normally, as a person who doesn't like to ask for help, because I'm one of y'all, I want to be able to handle it all by myself, I wouldn't have done. But just making that call and asking, hey, can you keep the boy, that was a huge amount of pressure lifted, because I didn't have to worry about that when I woke up this morning, right? Because I'm a single mom, if you didn't glean that by what I just said. So some of you have spouses, you know, you can have those conversations with spouses. If you are a single parent, then it's about creating the community around you that can support you. Does that make sense? Yeah? So we're talking about self-care strategies here. And then when you have days off, how many of you have a day off, but then you fill it with stuff? Like all the stuff that you didn't get to do during the week. Errands. And so this is what I call scheduled freedom. You have to schedule white space. Schedule white space. That means you put a time of unavailability in your calendar that then you get to pick what it is to do for yourself. For yourself. Does that make sense? And women in the room, I know you'll feel guilty about this, but once you do it a couple of times, you'll come to like it. You'll come to like it. So you can schedule yourself a nap. You can schedule yourself a pedicure, manicure. You can schedule yourself a massage. You can schedule yourself nothing, right, for 2 to 3 to 4 hours. Does anybody do that already, schedule themselves in white space? Awesome, awesome. Yeah, so it takes a level of practice and courage sometimes to be able to do that. But that's a way to be able to get some downtime and some self-time and some actually off time on your days off. And then there's calendar unpacking, which is basically decommitting from the things that you don't necessarily like to do and you don't necessarily have to do. Now, many of us may not have those things that meet both of those qualifications on our calendar, but if you do, and you can just make a list, you can just go through your calendar over the next 30 days and say, do I have to do that? Do I have to do that? Do I want to do that? Do I have to do that? Do I want to do that? And you can take some of that stuff off your calendar. All right. Does that make sense? Theoretically, right? And then knowing when to use no when people ask you to do things. You know, there's always the, especially if you're a parent, there's always the community stuff. People go, can you do this? And you're like, oh yeah, maybe if it's nothing on your calendar, oh, maybe I could do this. When to use no, when to use let me check my calendar, and when to use the counteroffer. Do y'all know what the counteroffer is? Counteroffer? Well, I can't do this, I can't do it this way, but what if we do it that way? Can you cover this weekend for me? Oh, let me look at my calendar. No, I can't cover this weekend, but maybe some other time. Maybe I can cover this weekend, or maybe I can cover this night, or is there, you know, like there's a counteroffer involved. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So you wanna learn when to, the difference between using no, let me check my calendar, and let me check my calendar. Who in here say yes automatically all the time? Who are yes people? Wow, we have some people that really take care of themselves in the room. That just sort of automatically say, yeah, I can do that. So, and especially the men, they're like, Let me check my calendar. Put some space between you and the yes. Okay? So your strategy is the big picture roadmap, and your structure is specific implementation steps and support. The structure is the what. So there's all kinds of accountabilities you can put in place for yourself, getting accountability partner. Who in here has health as a very important value for them? Health. And then who in here exercises on a regular basis, has time to exercise on a regular basis? Okay. All right. So if health is important to you, like if you want to lose a couple extra pounds, if you want to eat better, then creating accountability, and you all are a community, right? So creating accountability within the community can be helpful. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah? I talked about this earlier, engaging the people in your life to create accountability. And then how many of you like lists? You like lists. You write everything down on a to-do list, right? But how many of you have so many things on your to-do list that just to look at it can be overwhelming, right? Just to look at the list is like, oh. So what you do is you break that to-do down into bite-sized lists. Now I'm going to go to the next slide because technology, there's an app for that, right? So there's a list app for those of you who are list makers called Wunderlist, Wunderlist. It's a really great way if you need to organize the stuff that you have to do on a daily basis. And when you make your list, I recommend no more than 3 to 5 things on that list per day, if possible. Somebody say, ooh, right. So there are reminder apps, all right? So if you know you need to be drinking water, and we all have our phones on us, you can actually have a reminder come up on your phone, and the key is to not ignore the reminder, right? The reminder comes up and you're just like, okay, you just keep going. So I don't think any of you all in here needs a reminder to move, right? You guys are on your feet all the time. And then if you're involving your family, if you're delegating, like say you need to go grocery shopping and your hubby is willing to do that, or your significant other is willing to do that, then you have lists that sync across devices. Make your list and send it to the family. And yeah, there is meditation and mindfulness apps. So just because I said that breathing is not going to change your external circumstances, it can change your internal physiology. So where this makes a difference is this. You ever had one of those days where everything is going badly? You're slammed and you're maybe not feeling so well, and it's the hour before you're supposed to leave, and whoop, I'm not going to leave when I'm supposed to leave, and you're just feeling all the pressure, and this is when the meditation and mindfulness comes into play. This is when the breath comes into play, right? Just to give yourself some space to take the next right step. Does that make sense? When you're having a really bad day, the next right step. So I'm going to have you guys stand up with me for a second. Stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. We're going to do just this little breathing thing, just so you can know what it feels like. All right, I know I'm streaming. I know there are people in another room, so even though I can't see you, stand up. All right, so what I want you to do is this. I'm gonna tell you, and then we're gonna do it. So we're gonna take a deep breath, and we're gonna shake it out. Ready? So I want you to take a deep breath and shake it out. All right. You guys, okay, I'm gonna come over here so I can see you guys. Ready? So let's take a deep breath and shake it out. Shake it off. All right. And now we're going to do one more. This time at the end, we're going to smile. So the physiology of smiling The external smile actually changes the internal physiology. So just, think of something that you like. Think of something that pleases you. Ready? Take a deep breath in. Let it out. Yes. Hi. How you doing? Yeah. Yeah. So even some of you guys are laughing. Yeah, probably because it at first feels ridiculous. You can sit down now. But really, the external smile changes the internal physiology. And if you're having a crap day, you should try it. You'll be surprised at the difference it can make. Okay? All right. And maybe even try it with a partner, because then you'll make each other laugh. And laughter also changes the internal physiology and allows you to be able to, again, take that next right step. One of the things I really do encourage, as much as possible, is laughter. Not necessarily at the expense of others, because we do that, right? But laughter actually, again, it takes the edge off of a really bad day. So again, mindset empowers action in the face of seemingly unworkable circumstances. Does that now make even more sense?
Yes.
Yes? Yes, no, maybe so? Yes. Thank you. So there you go. If you're that kind of person, you can do the acts with the random positive quotes and inspirations. And then developing ongoing support systems. So more on an organizational level, how we can begin to get at the root cause is to begin to bring together those personal support and the personal support and accountability systems. So, of course, there's professional coaching. And coaching, what it does is it brings innovative ideas. You have that blind spot management, because, yes, even though we're all know-it-alls, we have blind spots, right? Just like cars. Now cars have those little, if you have one of those new fancy cars, they have those little lights that tell you when something's in your blind spot, right? So that's what the coach is. Mindset, reframing, and accountability. And then physician wellness, trainings and conferences and retreats, right? So this is the first step that your administration has taken to to developing ongoing support systems, and hopefully not the last, right? So there are lectures and conferences and retreats, and there is the WellMed conference. I mean, some of these conferences are here in the States and some of them are not. So there's the, for physicians, there's the American Conference on Physician Health. And I have to look to see, I don't think this conference, like I said, I don't think we've gotten that far. Mexico? What? No. No, it's not one in Mexico. But I don't know what's available yet for nurses, but that's hopefully there are some conferences that's focused specifically on nurses and other healthcare professionals as far as physician wellness. But this is an opportunity for departments to start to create things like this. And then building a culture of wellness inside of the organization. And how we do that is to encourage honest, solution-oriented discussions about the organizational culture, creating solutions, working together, even maybe to create flexible work schedules, leadership trainings, committees, buddy systems. These are just ideas, right? Ideas of some things that organizations can start to do in order to get at the root cause of burnout in the healthcare environment, right? So certainly there are things that we can do personally, but if we come into a system that is, if we come into a system that doesn't pull for our well-being, then of course it's going to make it more difficult for us to recover from that burnout. Does that make sense? Yes, okay. So no problem can be solved from the same consciousness that created it, right? And that's why those outside accountability make sense or are essential. And action that expresses priority, right? So taking action expresses priority. So that means that there's a lot of things that I've said here today. There's knowledge that I've given, but if you never take any action behind that knowledge, if you never take any action behind that, the information that was presented here today, then it's just another lecture. It's just another lecture. You'll walk out and it won't make a difference. But if there's action, that's action on a personal level and action on a community level, action on an organizational level, then we can actually start to really get to the root cause of burnout. And I want to end with this poem that I love by Portia Nelson. And it is called Autobiography in 5 Chapters. There's a hole in the sidewalk. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I didn't see it. I've fallen again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It is habit, but my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. And so my question to you is, when will you choose to walk down another street? And that's for the individual, and that's for the organization as well. So if you want to take further action, if you want free online trainings, monthly articles, tips, and all that, then you can take out your phone and you can text this number. And what you'll do is you'll receive a reply text back, and you just put your name and your email address in there, and then you'll get a free online webinar, and you'll have access to some of the articles that I do on a regular basis that give ongoing tips to this. And hopefully this won't be the last time we see each other. And that's it. That's what I have. Thank you for allowing me to be here. Thank you for playing, for participating, and take action. Take action.